Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. Welcome to Project Program's first workshop of the year. Today's workshop is going to be based on React.js, which is a really cool library that's very beginner friendly and is used in an extreme amount of scenarios, websites, web apps, UI development. So let's dive right in. Before we do, can everybody just take a moment to sign in? This will go on your Laurier experience record. So just sign this QR code. If you're having any trouble using the QR code, we'll leave this up for a minute or two. And when we send out the slides later, you guys can just press on the link or type in the link right into your browser. It'll all do the same. So we'll leave this up for a minute or two, and then we can get started with the workshop. And the link is also posted in the Twitch chat. If anybody's having trouble, you can just click on that. Yeah, it's all the same. Thanks, Yana, for posting that. All right, so I think that's good on the sign-in sheet. So if anybody does have any trouble or you joined late, don't worry, this will all be posted later on. Okay, so let's just go over a quick agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be going over what React.js is, some tools and skills required to use React.js, what is JSX, what are components and states, creating your first React application along with a quick demo, and we're going to look over some other approaches to creating your first React application. And then after we're done with all the content, we'll open the floor up to the Twitch chat. You guys can ask questions. Feel free to ask any questions about React. We'll be here to answer them. So let's hop right into what is React.js. So React.js is a JavaScript library developed at Meta, formerly known as Facebook. It's used for building user interfaces using components, and it's one of the most popular JavaScript libraries used in the creation of some of the most widely used websites such as Instagram, Airbnb, Netflix, Facebook, and a plethora of other websites and web apps. Yeah. So some tools and skills required for React. React is a pretty easy to learn and accessible library that can be picked up and utilized by developers of any skill level. But some prerequisites you could keep in mind are a basic understanding of JavaScript, since React is a JavaScript framework. So the syntax and kind of just the basics of JavaScript are kind of necessary for going into development with React. And because it is a JavaScript framework, you're going to need to know a little bit about HTML and CSS because they obviously do go hand in hand in the web development side of JavaScript. Git is also a pretty important skill or tool to know, obviously for collaboration and storing projects on GitHub or any other project collaboration service. It's really up to your preference. And JSX fundamentals and syntax, which I will pass over to Aiden, who will start explaining what JSX is.
Right, so JSX is the backbone of all React applications. JSX stands for JavaScript XML, and what it does, it allows for easy integration of HTML in React utilizing JavaScript. So what that means is I can use dynamic data such as my date in the example I presented below, and I'm just passing some string, and I'm passing that through some HTML tag within a JavaScript function. To note, there are some rules that you have to follow when using JSX. For example, it must have a parent element. If you see in my return statement in the example, I have two opening and closing tags that are empty. You can use a div, you can use a header, you can use whatever you want. And then following HTML rules or XML rules, they must have a closing tag. And as I said earlier, expressions can be used within the tags. And then also certain key attributes are reserved by JavaScript. And for example, a class has to convert to class name because there is a JSX alternative, and you can still utilize your basic HTML rules and fundamentals through JSX You just have to adapt to the JSX syntax.
Okay, so the benefit of React is it can turn any kind of HTML element into components, and then React can apply states to the components. So React components are stateful. You can set it to different kind of values, and you can use those states to then do different kind of functions. So components take in an input, and those are known as properties of a component, and it then returns those inputs as React elements. A prop, as I said, is an object with its past with various properties that it can then be used for like rendering purposes or any other kind of stateful change information. In this example, we have a values JSX file, which is returning a bunch of information about a different values for a company. So it has like the values title, it has an icon information, and then it has like the description of what the actual value is. This prop is then passed into the about JSX container, and it's passed in as properties of the values component. You can see that there's multiple values components. We have one for professionalism, we have one for empowerment. So both of these are it's the same initiation of the values component, but with different properties. And then in the program output, you can see that again you have the description, you have the title, and you have an icon for that. So the other benefit mentioned for React is its ability to give components states and follow through the stateful lifecycle. To know a bit more about how state works, we have to talk about the DOM. DOM is the document object model of the web page. So that includes like let's say BR tags or like paragraph tags, your header tags, your body tags, and that lays out the overview of like any kind of HTML page. Now, the benefit of React is that you can turn components into like reusable encapsulated objects that can then handle their own changes, like when it comes to their details and to make any sort of other like change for like. So the life cycle of every component is where the component is mounted to the DOM. So you add the component to the document access object model. You can then update the component anytime and for an n amount of times on the actual DOM. And then the component can be unmounted. Now, notice that the component can be only mounted and unmounted once, but it can be updated like any amount of times. Within those three functions, there's three different types of properties. So you can have within the React like stateful lifecycle, there is functions you can add while the component is being mounted, while it's being updated, and while it's being unmounted. An example where this could be used is let's say you have a timer running, but you only want the timer to start once the component of the timer is instantiated within the DOM. So you would use a function called object mount, and then within that function, you would actually instantiate the timing of the ticks for whatever the timer is. Now, when you build components, you this is like React principles and like the React guidelines, right? You want to use functional components over class components 90% of the time, unless if the component itself is updating too many times or if it's doing too many functions. In that case, you would use class components. Now, when we use functional components, we can impose the states and the different like React updating on its lifecycle methods in two different ways. The first example is the useState method, the useState hook, which is called, and the useEffect hook. The useState hook allows you to add and manipulate the state of like the functional component. So that basically means just like the component's actual value. And then useEffect is kind of like a sideline function, which you can use to like change properties on the DOM, like let's say like the title of the page or any other kind of example. Moving on to the next page, we can show you like what an example looks like. So let's say if you wanted to implement a carousel in React. So carousel being you have a bunch of like cards with different information, and then it can be slided on and off the screen with just a couple buttons that you can see in the bottom corner. So you would do this using the useEffect hook. What you're going to do is that you can see that we have three different on-click methods for each of the three dots. When each of those are called, an index is passed to the show slides function, and it changes like the CSS properties for those slides to simulate a card being on the screen or not being on the screen. So you can see that with like the different properties. So it can be classing the replace active or displaying the other sides. You can set it to flex or active. Now, the way this function is called is with the use effect hook. What the use effect hook does in this case is after the component is mounted, we want to be able to track uh each of its updates. So with use effect, we can change properties on the DOM, which would be like the flex and the active and the other active CSS properties. So that's a property of the DOM. You can change those properties using the use effect hook while the components are being updated.
All right, so now that we've touched on a lot of theory, let's get started in creating our first React application. So some prerequisites are that we have to have Node installed. Now, if you don't have it installed already, don't worry. You can click on this hyperlink later on to install it, or just search up Node install, and it'll vary depending on your operating system. But all in all, the steps are pretty simple and should be pretty straightforward to install. Now, Node is a backend JavaScript framework that executes JavaScript code outside the browser, and a main reason why Node is used a lot right now is because Google developed a VA engine which converts their JavaScript code to C++ and into machine code, so it just makes it run a lot faster. Now, some steps to create a React project include there are 3 steps over here. So npx create React app followed by the name of your app, cd and the name of your app, and then npm start. So now we're going to go through each one of these steps one by one. So starting with npx create React app and the name of the app. So first up, if you're on Windows, open up your command prompt. If you're on Mac or Linux, open up your terminal. If you have Node installed already, that is. And what you're going to do is you're going to type npx create React app, exactly like this, and then you're going to put the name of your app. So in this case, I put React 101. But one thing to note is that the name of your app has to follow pretty much programming variable syntax. So however you would declare a variable when you're programming any other language, you have to follow the same convention in this case when you're doing this. So over here, put React 101, press enter, and it should show something like this, where it shows a bunch of stuff installing. Looks like you're hacking into something. Looks pretty cool on your terminal, and it should be like this for about a minute or two, depending on your machine. Then at the end, it'll look something sort of like this. And this is when the installation is complete and everything was good in setting up your project. It'll show these 4 scripts. You don't have to worry about these right now. Just focus on these 2 at the bottom, which are our next 2 steps. So cd and then the name of our app, and then npm start. So cd name of your app. We have to do this to enter the directory of the project that we just created. So we're gonna do cd and name of our app. So in this case, React 101. And note that cd just changes the current working directory. So in this case, we're going from my desktop to the React 101 folder. So you can see once I execute this command over here, it doesn't say desktop. So over here it says desktop. Once you execute the command, now it shows React 101. And now we're gonna actually do the last step, which is doing npm start. Now note that npm stands for Node Packet Manager, and the npm start command will execute a script that React has given us. So you can see back over here that when you do it, you see an npm start and it starts our development server. It's given to us from React when we create our application. So once you run npm start, it'll take a minute and then it should show something like this. Compiled successfully. You can now view React 101 in the browser. It should show a local and another one here, but just focus on the local, and it'll show 3000 at the end. It shows 3000 at the end for me. It could show 3001, 4001, etc. It doesn't really matter. Now, depending on your machine as well, it might open up this URL in your default browser. It might not. If it doesn't, then just make sure you enter this on your browser. And once you do, it should show something like this, which is the starter code given to us when you create a React app. And if you see something like this, that means that everything was all good when you're setting up React, and you can now change up the code and build whatever you want. So that's how you can set up your own React app. Let's get into a quick demo. So we made a COVID-19 tracker to demonstrate some of the benefits that React has. So we're going to talk about 2 benefits over here, which is number 1, the React router, which allows navigation between different pages, and reusable component-based development, which is reusing one component n times. So later on, when you post the slides, you guys can click these hyperlinks to look at the website for the tracker, and then also to look at the GitHub repo. So first, let's get started with React Router. So in order to access the landing page or the home page, any of the paths listed in this red box, so in this array over here, I should say, will work. So //home, /index, and /landing will all work to show you the same page, which in this case is the home page. Similarly, any of the elements of this array over here, so /stats, /statistics, etc. These will all work as well to show you the COVID-19 stats page. This is something that React Router does for us. It simplifies a lot of the logic and allows us to put an array of paths over here if we want any of these to work for if the user puts any of these in the URL. So now we're going to talk about reusable component-based development. This idea involves building an abstract component that can be used in multiple other instances of an application. So an example I can give that everybody here can sort of relate to is when they go on Instagram, they go on their homepage, they see, let's say you have like 6 Instagram posts. Each one of those posts is a generic component that then gets rendered with different information that's passed in the form of props, which Ozair touched on earlier. So props, just to recap quickly, props have like different fields of data inside. So when you go on your Instagram homepage and you see 6 posts, each one of those posts has different props passed in. One field can be for the image, one can be for the geo tag, one can be for paleo tag, what can be for the caption, so on and so forth. So these are all components that are reused and in the form of, and React does this really nicely with reusable component-based development. So in this example specifically, since we made a COVID-19 tracker, I want to display COVID-19 statistics in a card for each country. Now, I can either hard code this in for each 198 or 197 countries there are, but this will take a long time. So I can build one generic component and reuse it as many times as I want, passing in data through some sort of iterative structure like a loop. So this is what the end goal is supposed to be for the card. So we have, the country code, new confirmed cases with the amount of cases there, and new death with the amount of death, new recovered with the amount that there are, so on and so forth for all of these sets. This is the goal for each country that we want. So how do we do this? So first we have to make our component. So this is the component right here we're gonna make. So you can see that we have props over here. We have some default attributes like the background that we want to be dark text. But what we want to focus on right over here is the body. So over here we have the title. So you can see over here we have props.country to say that this is where the country is gonna go. Props.country code to say this is where the country code will go, and then new confirm, new death, so on and so forth. Now, one thing to note is this is when we're calling the component in some other file, and you can see we're calling the name of the functional component, so custom cards, we're calling it as custom cards, and you can see that over here, all of the orange keywords over here, so country code, exactly line up with how it's spelled over here. So you can with the red over here, so you can see country matches country code matches country code, and so on and so forth. And we set those to the value of the object that we're trying to get the data from. Okay, so in this case, we're trying to get it from the value object, we're getting the country field from that and passing it in to this orange country field, which then gets put right over here. So just to recap, each of the highlighted fields gets populated with the data that's being passed in from over here. It gets populated over here, and the end result is we get something like this, where we can dynamically add as many cards as we want. So just to quickly show you guys, if we open it up right here, you can see that we have cards for each country over here, all showing different information that's all dynamically added. So this is one of the beauties of React, which is a reusable component-based development. It saves a lot of time, and it's one of the reasons why React is pretty commonly used. Now, Aiden's going to touch on some other approaches to creating your first React application.
Hi, yeah. So as we touched on earlier, we have the Node Package Manager, which just bundles together packages for you, and you can install dependencies for your project, etc. I personally like to use Yarn, which is another package manager which is built on top of NPM. The reason I use Yarn, without going too much into depth, is it just speeds up the process, making project management a lot more efficient and a lot speedier. It's quicker and easier to use, in my opinion. The commands are pretty much the same when installing a dependency. Just having to adjust for the specific syntax that Yarn uses. Another thing I would personally recommend over Create React App is Vite, simply because Vite bundles together a lot of the JSX modules involved in a project to increase loading speed of a project. This meaning that it uses something called hot module replacement, which a module is essentially just your JS file, and it bundles them together behind the scenes and then loads it onto the screen almost instantaneously. So it's a lot quicker to use, especially when building larger projects and scaling your project, etc. I have 2 lines of code attached, depending on the package manager you use, Yarn versus NPM, and then you're just gonna follow the command to create a React app, and the output should look something like on the right.
So these are some resources we put over here just to help you get started. So we have links to the React docs, React Bootstrap. For those of you who don't know what Bootstrap or React Bootstrap is, they have a lot of components that you can use and install. They have card components, buttons, in login forms, etc. And you can sort of just use them and play around with them. So we added that link here. I talked about React Router, but if you want to go more into React Router and look into more advanced things, you can check the docs here. And we also have the docs for Vite and Yarn, which Aiden talked about. And just a reminder that these slides will be shared, so all the hyperlinks you can go through, and you can also go through the content later on. But as for right now, we'd like to open the floor up to any questions you guys may have. Just type in the Twitch chat, and we'll answer them as best we can.
I can take this question. So a prop is like let's say if you have a component, right? The component is just a card. So within the card, you would have like an icon, so that could be like somebody's face. It could be like a header tag, and then it would be like a body tag within that. So that's a component. Now, the component, the actual information of the component, like what the stuff actually says, like what the header says or what the paragraph tag says, that is a property. So component is like the actual thing that gets its stain sheeted like multiple times, like and can be like replicated as you saw with the COVID tracker. That's a component. The actual information in the component, that's a property of the component. Now, a hook, like let's say use state or use effect, those are React methods that are used. They're hooked onto like regular JavaScript functions to be used as React methods. So they again, like the use state, that one is to change the state of a component, and the use effect is to change like a property of the DOM. Does that answer your question?
I can take the follow up. So, uh, props and hooks are usually used simultaneously, because props are used for functional components, and hooks are also only available for functional components. So they're both really used, because they're both really used, but they work in different facets, because props are mainly just for information that's being passed in, whereas hooks are mainly used for manipulating the state of the app. And the state is something that's controlled by the user's end, whereas props are passed in, manually from whatever code is written. So an example can be, let's say you're on Instagram, you see a post. The post is going to be a component, and if you like the post, now you're updating the state, because let's say there were 100 likes on it, you drop a like, now there's 101. So you'd use a hook to sort of automatically update that part of the component, whereas the prop would be something like the picture that's being displayed. That would be a prop. So they're pretty different in that way, and they're sort of used a little bit differently as well, because props are something that's normally static, whereas hooks are used to manipulate the state of the application. Does that sort of answer the question?
So once the just before the response to that question comes in, there's another question from Ors asking, when finished creating a React project, do they provide a server for us to host for the website/web page we create, or how does it work? So how Sharuk was going over npm start, that starts our development server. So this runs our website or web app on our local host, whatever our local port is, it'll run it there, so we can see kind of what's going on, how our code updates in real time. However, nobody else really has access to this, so we have to host it using an external service. As if you guys, once you get the slides for the workshop and you press on the example for the COVID tracker that Sharuk made, you can see that it's hosted using GitHub Pages, which is GitHub's kind of alternative to website hosting, a free alternative. But there's many different website hosting services that you can use. Obviously, usually they're paid if you want like a certain domain name, but no, React does not inherently offer like a hosting service.
I'm just gonna answer the question, which is what does the file structure of a React app look like? I can actually show you by going to the GitHub repo for this. So this is what the file structure is gonna look like. There might be some files that are hidden just because GitHub won't let you upload those because they could be private. But for the most part, it'll look like this. You have package.json, which shows all of the dependencies you have along with some scripts. There's a README file, which is the standard React README file, but you can update this for your own app. There's public, which is when you do push your application, all of these files will be pushed as they are with no changes. Then the main thing is SRC, which stands for source, which is where all of your code goes. So in for this COVID tracker, this is what the file structure sort of looks like. You have the standard logo. You can delete this, but I kept it because I kind of like the logo. I kind of like this React logo here. Then there's index.js, which is sort of the main, or which is the root of your entire application. It runs the entire code. So this is something that every React project will always have. And this sort of you can structure it as you want. I like to break it up into folder just to organize things. And yeah, so this is what the standard React file structure will look like. Just to answer the other question, so what are context and when should it be used? So context is normally something when you want a bunch of components to have access to the same piece of information, and it's sort of used in that instance. So I can give you an example, which is, let's say you have an application where you have to log in, and once you log in, you can access a different piece of information. So let's say you go to Instagram, for example. When you go to the Instagram profile page, let's say they can have a context hook that surrounds your profile page, your DMs, and your feed. The reason for this is because to access your profile, you probably need to look at your user ID token to see if it's to see if you're logged in. To look at your feed, you need to do the same thing. To look at your DMs, you have to do the same thing. But you don't want to make these requests three different times for each time you navigate between them because this makes your app slow. So you would use a context hook in this case just to make it so once the user does log in for the first time, that data is now available to any of the children views that surround the hook. So in this case, anything from the profile, from the feed, and the DMs can look at all the data in the context hook, which in this case would be the login information. And as for where the slides will be posted, I actually have no idea. Anyone know where the slides are going to be posted? Discord. Yeah, it'll be posted in Discord. The package.json and package lock.json, they're automatically created when you create your React app. So when you follow the steps that we went through, it'll automatically create this for you. Are there any alternatives to create React app invite? I am not sure, to be honest. I've only heard of those two. I would imagine there are some other ways, but I think create React app invite are the two main ones just because of how efficient they are and how they take a lot of the burden off the developer.
Okay, so if there are no more questions in chat, I think one more just came in. Could you quickly go over Veet and Yarn again, please? I think that's in Aiden's kind of
Sure.
playing field.
Yeah.
So the idea of Yarn, instead of using npm, it's just a package manager alternative. As I said, under the hood, there's a lot of things that are a lot of moving parts that are making it a lot faster. Again, the only difference being, the Yarn might use a different syntax compared to npm. Like you want to use npm install, you'd use npm add, for example. I mean, sorry, Yarn add as the alternative. And then, so pretty much everything you do with npm, like installing packages, whatever line of code of execution you're running, will be the exact same in Yarn. Again, just changing the syntax, doing the exact same thing. It also creates a package.json, and instead of creating a package lock, it creates a yarn.lock file, locking all your files, your dependencies. Um, and then Vite is an alternative to the command create React app. Again, it's a bundler. It bundles together all the JS modules, essentially doing exactly what create React app does, just in a lot more efficient and effective manner. It hot reloads. It reloads your pages a lot faster. So, for example, you use your fundamental React tools and syntax. The only difference being you're pushing it through Vite instead. And when you push it through Vite, it loads faster and it has a lot more efficiency when it comes to, loading the page and rendering whatever components you have. What kind of applications is React used for? Um, so you can use it pretty much for any web development type project. As you said, I think in your example, you said like a personal website. Yeah, you could most definitely make a personal website in React. There is a learning curve to React, in my professional opinion. So maybe get your fundamentals down first before you wanna, as you said, over-engineer. But if you know that there's a certain feature that your project has to have, and it can only be done through React for whatever reason, because React has all these features, then use React. That's the thing I've always like lived by was, you're supposed to use the tool is not supposed to use you. So just because it's all fancy and there's this big, circle around React, it doesn't mean you have to use it. The simplest solution is the best solution. But if you do need to use React for whatever reason, use it.
Okay, so I don't see any new questions rolling in. We'll leave the floor open just for a little bit longer. If anybody does have any questions, just feel free. If not, I'm gonna plug some other LCS events coming up. On November 8th, we have Co-op 101. So if you guys are looking for co-ops, kind of scared about co-op, you're in first year, don't really know what's going on, make sure to attend that. November 10th is our next CP 104/103 review session. If any of you are in first year and want to just get a heads up over other students in CP 104 and 103, make sure to attend. Yep, so Yana just said it in chat. Co-op 101 is on Tuesday, November 8th in BA 110, and it'll also be streamed on our Twitch, and it's at 7 o'clock. And yeah, review session November 10th. And that kind of concludes our time for the night. So, yeah, it was great speaking with you all. Thanks for asking such insightful questions. We hope you learned a lot. And we hope you can begin developing with React wherever that may take you. And good luck to you all in your coding journey. So thank you all for joining us. Have a good night.